I'm Chef Frank, this is Protocooks, and today we're making a Cuban sandwich. You might ask, Chef Frank, why are you making a Cuban sandwich? You're not from Florida or Tampa, or you're not Cuban or anything. And it's true. But a Cuban sandwich happens to be one of my wife's favorite sandwiches, and one of my favorite sandwiches as well. We have really good memories of it. Before we got married, when we were dating, she lived in Jersey City in New Jersey, and there was this place, it was iconic. It was called the Hartgrove Cafe, and we would go there for Cubans and yuca fries, and they made like fruit shakes and stuff like that. And that's where we would go quite often. It was reasonably priced. We didn't have any money at the time, and it was absolutely delicious. And this is kind of my take on the Hartgrove Cafe's Cuban sandwich. It was always good. Every time we went, it was delicious, and we kind of fell in love over that sandwich. So that's why I like Cuban sandwiches. This is what you're gonna need for my Cuban sandwich. Swiss cheese, pickles, dill pickles, soft squishy bread, butter, mustard, roast pork, and ham. Before we assemble and cook these sandwiches, I want to highlight some of the ingredients. The cut of meat I bought for my pork roast is a pork shoulder picnic, which is the lower half of the pork shoulder. The foot would go here. I like this cut of meat, it's fairly cheap. Plus I get a little bonus out of it. I'm not going to use all of this for my sandwich. The rest of it I'll use for like ramen stock, the bones and the skin, carnitas. It's a really versatile cut of meat, so I usually buy a big piece and kind of parse it out into different uses. All right, let's cut it. I got a nice boning knife here. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna follow the bone. I'm not too worried about how pretty it is, you know? So I just cut along the bone with my knife. And then I'm just gonna pull it out away from the bone. And once I get the bone out, I'm just gonna cut it into like a roast and then whatever little pieces I need from it. All right? Try not to stab yourself. Right? I'll get close to the bone, and anytime I get little pieces like this, I'll use that for like sausage. But like I said earlier, this bone is really good for stock. Gotta go up and over that there. All right, so bone is out. And then what I'm gonna do for my actual roast for the sandwich is this piece right here. There's a nice amount of fat, right? There's some skin on there, there's a little fat. I'm gonna just trim off the end. And this is what I'm gonna use for my roast. For roasting our pork, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to just rub it all over. You notice that I'm on a rack, right? I like to cook on a rack so we get good circulation of air, and it roasts a lot evenly. You notice I've left the skin on, and I've left the fat on. This will help kind of baste it and keep it nice and moist. Sometimes when people do Cuban sandwiches, they go a little overboard with seasoning. I find that you don't need to put a ton of stuff on this. I like salt and pepper. Right? I'm gonna go heavily with salt and pepper. I think the oil actually helps this stick. I'm gonna keep this hand. I can touch the pork, so I'm not gonna touch my salt and the pork at the same time. Right? I'm not worried about too much pepper on the bottom, but I really wanna season this well. Okay? So I have it seasoned really well. I'm gonna throw it in about 400-degree oven until it's cooked and nice and medium rare in the middle. Let's talk about the mustard. Traditionally, a Cubano or a Cuban sandwich has yellow mustard. I like yellow mustard. I don't love it, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate for this, but I want to use a Dijon mustard. I think the flavor is better. I think it's not as strong, and it just adds so much more to the sandwich. So I go with Dijon mustard. Don't hate me for it. Traditionally, Cuban bread is very light and spongy and fluffy. You don't want to use a baguette for this. It's too dense. And once it cooks up, it's going to be hard to get through. So I go to my deli section or my bakery section of my local supermarket. You find these nice spongy rolls, soft and spongy. That's what I want. You'll normally see Cuban bread as a long piece of bread that you'll cut into pieces, but I find that these are the perfect portion size. So you don't want to go with like the most expensive bread here. Believe it or not, this is fairly cheap, and I think that this works so much better for a Cuban sandwich. One of the other key ingredients for a Cuban sandwich is pickles. Now, I might get a little hate for this as well, but I like little mini pickles. There's a couple of reasons why I choose the small pickles. First of all, they don't have a lot of seeds in them, right? It's really nice and tight in the center. And sometimes when you have those big pickle slices, the center is kind of squishy and wet, and I don't like that. I like a nice, firm crunch to my pickle, right? Second reason is sometimes when you have those big pickle slices, you take a bite of the sandwich, and the pickle slides out, right? If you don't bite hard enough. This way, if I sprinkle these on the sandwich, I'm gonna get a little bite of dill pickle on every bite, and then when I pull out, when I'm taking my bite, I just get a little piece. I don't get the whole slice of pickle. Slice them thin, and set them aside. I've seen a lot of Cubans that use like a deli ham, like sliced on the slicer, and that's fine, but I choose to do something a little different here. I usually buy a spiral ham for this. I like the spiral ham. It has a little bit of sweetness on the outside. The slice is a little thicker, it's a little bit smokier, and I feel like it just adds more to the sandwich. Not only that, if you buy a spiral ham, you can have dinner, spiral ham for dinner, and Cubans the next day, so you get a couple of meals out of it, and that's one of the things I like about doing it this way. All right, our pork roast is done, right? Look at it. And this is why I leave the skin on. Look at that. This is a snack. It's a good snack. It's not going to go into our sandwich, but look at that. It's like crispy and delicious. The fat has kind of rendered out. I'm going for like a medium rare in the center. I'm going to let this rest, okay? When you cook meat like this, when you roast it, all the juices kind of squeeze towards the center. If you let it rest, the juices kind of relax and go to the outside of the roast. So I'm going to let this rest, and then I'm going to slice it. Now that the pork is rested for a little while, I'm going to slice what I need. All right, and like I said, this is a little easier if you do it the night before. I'm gonna cut that skin and fat off, but look at that. We might as well take a second and talk about that, because look, oh my gosh. Camera lady, come on. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Putting that over here, all right? And now I'm just gonna slice. Go as thin as you possibly humanly can. Thin, thin, thin. Right, you don't want this to be like chunky and chewy. I try and leave some of the fat on there too, because fat is flavor, exactly. Right, slice it thin, almost shredding it. Let's set this aside and assemble. It's time to assemble our Cubans, and I'm gonna do this in assembly line style like we would in a restaurant. So we'll cut our bread in half, all the way in half. I'm going to place one part of the bread close to me and the other matching top across. All right? And I like this method because you can make a lot of sandwiches. So I'm only making 3, but you could line up this whole cutting board and make like 10 sandwiches ahead of time. A little bit of mustard, right? On both sides. Don't go crazy with the mustard. We want mustard flavor, but we don't want it to be overpowering. And I'm using the Dijon, like I said. Just a little bit of that mustard. Right? And then I put the cheese. This is key, right? I want to put the cheese on touching the bread, right? Because this is the thing that we want to melt. So I'm going to put the cheese on each side of the bread. And the cheese is kind of the glue that's going to hold it together. So I'm only using about a slice and a half for each sandwich. Not too crazy, we don't want it to overpower, but I put it on the outside so that when the cheese melts, it's holding the sandwich together on the top and the bottom. What I find about a good Cuban is that it's balanced, right? It doesn't have like way too many of one flavor on it. Mustard cheese. Then I'm gonna put my ham on, and I'm trying to make everything kind of fit within the sandwich, right? We don't want this to be overly thick, and my wife does not like thick sandwiches, so this is why it's one of her favorite sandwiches. So, ham is on, okay? And then I'm gonna use my roasted pork. If the roast pork's a little pink, don't worry about it. Everyone's worried about pork being a little pink. The sandwich is not only going to cook a little more, but a little pink in your pork is okay. It means that it's juicy and it's not overly like dry, right? One of the biggest complaints with pork is that it's dry, okay? So cheese, pork, right? Next we're gonna do our pickles. And again, with the pickles, you see these little slices. I try and like stud it all around so that we're gonna get nice little bites of pickles rather than that long, slimy, kind of slippery piece. I don't like it. I don't like it. Good. Excellent. So we're studded with our pickles. And now you just take your top, fold it over. Top, fold it over, and fold it over. And our sandwiches are basically ready to go. It's time to cook our Cubans. And today I'm going to use a cast iron skillet with like a baking pan for cakes, right? Because it fits really well in there. Preheat your pan, especially if you're using this cast iron pan. I'm using softened butter. So what I'm gonna do is take my softened butter all over the outside, turn it over, get it on the bottom too. All right, and this goes right into the pan. I'm gonna do 2 sandwiches at a time here. Nice butter. This is unsalted. I don't need any extra salt. Okay, this goes in, and we get our pan, and we press. Squish it down real good. I'm over kind of medium-low heat. I'm gonna squish it down and hold it. And that's what you want. You want this to be crispy. You don't want the fluffy insides of the bread. You want the outside to get crispy and everything in the middle to be squishy. All right? And you want the cheese to melt. So that's the most important thing. If it's over too high of a heat, it's gonna burn before the cheese melts. And what I'm really careful about, and what's really helpful with the small pieces of pickle, is that when I press it down, the bread doesn't slide. A lot of times when you do those long slices of pickle, the bread slides, right? And then you have an uneven sandwich. So I'm really happy that this kind of went compressed straight down. One of the other things some people use is a panini press. Now, traditionally, a Cuban sandwich does not have lines on it, right? But if that's all you have is like a George Foreman grill or a panini press, go for it. Turn it over. And I don't want this sandwich to be greasy, right? I just put a little nice scraping of butter on top. It's nice and crisp, look. You can see my cheese is melting through a little. I'm getting a little cheese pull there. Top, now it's getting a little hot, so I'm gonna use a towel so I don't burn myself and press it down. If you start to see smoke, your flame is too high, you gotta adjust your temperature. I always tell my students, we adjust temperature and we season our food, right? But look, getting nice and crisp. If you look in here, come in here. Look at the cheese, it's melting, right? Look at that. And we get that little piece of fried cheese on the outside. That is, oh my gosh. That crispy cheese that comes out is probably the best thing ever. Okay, we're getting nice and crispy there. I'm gonna give it another minute, and then we're good to go. We're gonna cut it and taste it. All right, let's get them and cut them. I'm just gonna cut one for now. I'll save the other one for later. Nice and crispy. Hear that? Traditionally, you'll see a Cuban sandwich cut on a severe diagonal. Do you need a bread knife for this? No. As long as you have a sharp knife, you don't need a bread knife. Let's look at it. Look at it. Oh my gosh. Look how beautiful that is. Little pieces of pickle. Our cheese is melty. You can see our ham and our roast pork. And it's not overstuffed. We don't want this to be an overstuffed sandwich. This is like the perfect size. Okay, let's give it a try. Look at this. This is like one of my favorite things in the world, like that crispy cheese. I'd like to say absolutely delicious, but I say that too much. I'd like to say this is a solid, solid Cuban sandwich. Oh my gosh, really good. My gosh. This sandwich hits all the notes. You have to make it at home. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, give us the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. We have merch in the description down below. Our address is down there as well. I want to thank all my patrons on Patreon for supporting us. Thank you guys so much. And that is my Cuban sandwich. I'm Chef Frank. This is Proto Cooks. Have a good one.